Good evening. You are tuning in to AWANI Tonight with me, Cynthia Ng. Malaysiakini found guilty for contempt. What are the wider repercussions? And ahead of vaccine arrival this Sunday, we take a closer look at some of the logistical hurdles. That's coming up. The federal court today found Malaysiakini liable in contempt of court over comments posted by readers that were deemed offensive to the judiciary. The online news portal was fined 500,000 ringgit.
In a 6-1 decision, the court found Malaysiakini fully responsible for third-party comments made by 5 readers on the portal last year. Attorney General Tan Sri Idrus Harun had filed the charges against Malaysiakini and Editor-in-Chief Stephen Ng over the comments that he said undermined public confidence in the judiciary. Malaysiakini and Ng had maintained that they could not be held responsible and that the offending comments had been immediately removed after they were contacted by police.
The conversation right now centers whether a news portal can be held liable for comments made by third parties published on their website. Media groups have slammed the decision, saying that it is a clampdown on press freedom. We asked lawyer Lim Wei-Jet on what he thinks on the ruling and its wider repercussions.
Normally in contempt of court, you are only liable if you are the person who publishes that contemptuous statement. But in this case, Malaysiakini was the one that sort of provided the platform for these contemptuous statements to be published. So how the court imposed liability on Malaysiakini is that the court said that Malaysiakini had constructive knowledge, or in other words, Malaysiakini ought to have known that these comments were contemptuous and they should have prevented these comments from even appearing on their website. It sends a very chilling message to freedom of speech and also media freedom in Malaysia, because effectively what all online news portals in Malaysia have to do now is that they either have to A, disable third-party comments on their platform completely, or B, install like a system or an algorithm to detect contemptuous comments before they are being allowed to appear on their website, which could, unintentionally inhibit free speech or genuinely constructive criticism out there. So that is the kind of consequence when media companies fear that the state is going to go after them because of these third-party comments. But it doesn't stop there. So social media companies may also be liable for third-party comments if we follow the line of reasoning of the federal court in Malaysiakini's decision.
The first shipment of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is expected to arrive in Malaysia this Sunday. Here's what you need to know about how the vaccines are transported here before making its way to vaccination centres nationwide.
The logistics chain for the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine begins from the vaccine manufacturing plants. The vaccines are first put in special containers which must stay below 70 degrees Celsius. They are put in boxes containing dry ice capable of keeping the vaccine effective for 10 days while closed, or up to 30 days if dry ice is replaced every 5 days. The vaccine will then be flown to Kuala Lumpur International Airport, the first point of arrival in Malaysia. From there, they will be distributed either via domestic flights or land transport to 55 vaccine distribution hubs. They can be stored for 6 months in ultra-cold freezers at -70 degrees Celsius. The vaccine will then be transported to vaccination sites where they will be thawed and diluted for use.
The World Health Organization reported a 16% drop in new COVID-19 cases last week amid a global vaccine rollout. We take a closer look at some of the possible logistical challenges that may arise from the rollout and what we could learn from other countries. We speak to Astro Muhammad Khalid, Chief Executive at the Galen Center for Health and Social Policy.
Generally, 3 main areas that there could be problems or challenges which pop up. And that is, 1 is cold chain capacity, 2 is storage requirements, and the 3 would be last mile delivery. Now, almost every country that has started rolling out the COVID-19 vaccines has encountered challenges along the way. So we are already seeing that the Malaysian government, that it is already learning from many of these hard-won and expensive experiences and lessons learned from other countries and putting into place mechanisms which prevent, or actually try to prevent, some of the logistical problems from happening which could lead to wastage. And last mile delivery is going to be one, if not the greatest challenge. You've done everything you can to ensure that the vaccines arrive to the vaccine storage centers intact and with their integrity unblemished. How then do you ensure that they get to vaccination sites and shots to arms within a short space of time, especially in rural healthcare centers? Imagine, you've done everything right, but people may not be coming forward to get vaccinated. And your vaccine doses sit in your freezer at the site and the clock is ticking. So we need every shot to be utilized and not wasted. And unfortunately, we have seen this very scenario which I just described occurring in many countries around the world where vaccines are lost in transit or they sit in freezers without people coming forward to get vaccinated. So there's a lot that the Malaysian government can learn from what is being done in other countries, especially in those countries which the vaccine rollout has been tremendously successful.
With the amount of preparation being put in by the government, Azrul is confident that Malaysia is ready to receive the vaccine when it arrives.
So I think there's quite a lot that has been put into preparation by the government at the moment. It's really the devil's in the details, but really it's the implementation later on that we're going to start seeing a lot of these problems pop up, and it's going to be something that the government has to think on its feet and solve many of these problems as they come along. I mean, it will take a while before it irons out, but basically we're going to see some initial hiccups, but after that it'll be a lot better, hopefully.
More on vaccine rollout and its logistical challenges. Taking into account the first batch of Pfizer-BioNTech vaccines require ultra-cold temperature of -70 degrees Celsius. Special advisor to the Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, Khairi Jamaluddin, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Gaus Muhammad Azam explains the government's plan in facing possible challenges.
For a backup plan, I think we've mentioned this previously, even before we bought the ultra-cold freezers. In Malaysia, these ultra-cold freezers are not uncommon. Most universities have them. I mean, we did a very rough calculation. I mean, at least in the universities all over Malaysia, we have more than 125 ultra-cold freezers available. And these are just the universities. We also have ultra-cold freezers in NIBM, our National Institute of Biotech. So we have plan B, plan C, all ready to come into play if required. But the new ultra-cold freezers that MOH have bought, I think, should be more than enough to cover all the vaccines, the Pfizer vaccines that we are getting. And for the -20 and 2 to 8 degrees, that's even easier, and the capacity is already there to handle all of these vaccines.
He said the main challenge is not storage or logistics, which will be handled by the vaccine supply companies themselves. For him, the main concern is getting enough people inoculated.
We're probably not going to keep the vaccines for very long. Once the vaccine arrives, we probably try to vaccinate people with it. We're not going to store it for too long. So there is also this rule where MOH is going to when you receive the vaccine, right, half of the vaccine is going to be stored for your second shot. For example, like the Pfizer vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine, they all require 2 doses. So they have this one shot, one reserve policy where half of the vaccine is going to be stored for the second dose. But even if they are stored, they're not going to be stored for very long. Pfizer vaccine requires 21 days between dose 1 and dose 2. So they are just going to be stored for 21 days. After that, we're going to try and use it as much as possible.
Malaysia will be receiving the Sinovac COVID-19 vaccine on February 27th. Science, Technology and Innovation Minister Khairi Jamaluddin said the vaccine will be delivered in bulk for bottling by Pharmaniaga Berhad.
In a tweet, Khairi said that the National Pharmaceutical Regulatory Agency NPRA is currently reviewing Sinovac's regulatory submission. Meanwhile, the initial batch of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine is expected to arrive in Malaysia this Sunday morning, and the vaccination program will start on February 26. On January 13, Pharmaniaga announced that the company had inked a deal with Sinovac to bottle and distribute 14 million doses.
While the Sinovac vaccine is underway to getting approval from the NPRA, there are still concerns regarding the safety of the CoronaVac. Head of Research and Development at Pharmaniaga Berhad, Dr. Badarul Hisam Abdul Rahman, tells us on the efficacy and safety of this vaccine.
During phase 1 and 2 clinical trial done in China, the volunteers age group were employed for adults, from elderly, age of 60 over 89 years old, and they were tested for different dose regimen, 14 or 28 days apart from the first and second dose, and they were looking at the systemic and also local adverse reaction upon immunization, and between the vaccine and between the placebo. So there's no significant difference between the general side effect to the localization. It's like a normal injection. Generally, this vaccine is very safe because we are using a well-established technology that has been used for different types of vaccines, such as hepatitis A, polio, and rubella.
Dr. Badrul Hisam advised the general public to seek further information on the vaccine on official portals and scientific journals.
There are a lot of publications specific under Kementerian Kesihatan Malaysia and the National Regulatory Agency. And also, if they want to go into more specific technically, they could refer to WHO websites. For those who are from the scientific background, they can actually look at online publication, typically journals such as Lancet. They publish all these clinical trial data in terms of safety and efficacy. They can look at that in details.
On to other local news, Malaysian students are expected to be back in classrooms under the new normal from the beginning of March. Senior Minister for Education, Datuk Muhammad Razzi Majidin, in a media briefing today explained that preschoolers and those in Standards 1 and 2 will resume face-to-face classes on March 1st, while Standards 3 to 6 will do so on March 8th. As for secondary schools, Johor, Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu will commence on April 4th, while all remaining states will begin on April 5th. Australia and Facebook are reportedly in talks after the social media giant sparked a global outrage by blocking out news for its Australian users. Canberra had earlier insisted that it would not back down on a new media law that would force tech firms to pay for news content.
From Thursday, Facebook had blanked out the pages of media outlets for Australian users and blocked them from sharing any news content. Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said he had spoken with Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg today and that negotiations would continue over the weekend.
It's been a tough year for Southeast Asia, the pandemic coupled with domestic political crises. Through this volatility, can Malaysia emerge as a regional leader? Tonight on Consider This, we speak to Tan Sri Syed Hamid Alba, former Foreign Minister. And that is all we have for you on AWANI tonight. Get the latest news updates on COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines from astroawani.com and Astro AWANI app. I'm Cynthia Ng. We'll see you next week.